Okay, today we're going to begin chapter 8, Matthew chapter 8. And several of the stories in Matthew chapter 8 deal with certain kinds of healing and casting out devils. And bear in mind that Jesus did a lot of healing. And so the stories of healing that we have in the Bible, or in the book of Matthew, Matthew has a reason for telling the story. It, in no way do these stories represent all the stories of healing that Jesus did. Okay, so in chapter 8, verses 1 through 3, talks about healing a leper. All right, and the point of this story is the willingness of God to heal. The leper says to him, "Lord, if thou wilt, thou canst make me clean." And Jesus put forth his hand and touched him, saying, "I will, be thou clean." And immediately the leprosy was healed, was cleaned. Okay, the willingness of God to heal us. He wants to heal us, okay? And that's his will, that's his desire. But I've talked about the idea of free agency. He can't heal us unless we want him to. He wills to do it, but if we don't want him to, he can't heal us, you see? Because of our free agency. If we want to stay sick, we want to stay the way we are, he's not going to do anything for us, you see? He wants to do it, and if you ask him to do it, he will do it, you see? So then the next story, and I'm not going to read all this. You can get your Bibles out and you can read the whole story. And if you have questions, please ask me. The next story has to do with the centurion that has a servant who is sick with palsy, which we might call it epilepsy today, or it might be some other kind of, it could be cerebral palsy, or it could be any one of the other different types of palsy that we recognize today. But in any case, he's not doing well, tormented by it. Now, Jews were not supposed to enter the homes of non-Jews. Okay, they were, the home of a non-Jew was unclean. They were not supposed to go in. And so Jesus said, well, I'll come take care of the servant. But then the centurion says, no, I'm not worthy that you come into my house. But I know that since you have authority to heal, that you don't have to see him, you just have to say the word. It's just like me as a centurion. I tell a soldier to do this, and he goes and does it. And I know that because you're a man of authority, that you can do the same thing. And Jesus marveled at the great faith of this man, that he had enough belief in Jesus that the servant would be healed, even though Jesus was not there personally to heal the person. And so Jesus said the word and he was healed. And the important point of this story is authority. Okay? Authority. Jesus did things because he had authority from his Father in heaven. And his servants in past times, the apostles and that he called and ordained, he gave them authority to heal the sick, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But even in this day, authority is necessary for healing. It's got to come from someplace. And I'll talk a little bit more about the authority just a little bit later. But without authority, God can't do very much either. And if people reject the authority, then he can't do much either. I mean, everything that's done in the kingdom of God is done by agreement. You have to be agreeable with God and his way of doing things, or it doesn't get done. Okay? He wants to do it, but he's not going to take away our free agency to do it. He's not going to just jump in and start doing stuff for us if we don't want him to do it. You've got to want the Lord to do it, or he doesn't do it. Okay? That's just the way it works. Okay? And you know, and I have a little bit of experience with saying the word from a distance and having people heal. I do it all the time. I hear about, I've got a group of believers in Africa and another group of believers in the UK, and all the time I'm getting a letter that will say, this person or such and such a person needs healing, and I'll, you know, say the words, and the person will be healed, even though I'm not there. And you know, having authority from God is not does not necessarily require that you actually put hands on somebody to heal them. You just have to say the right words, and if they have the faith and they want to be healed, and you want to heal, because I do want people to be healed, you know, and so it works. And it works just the same in these days as it did in Jesus' time. Yes, I do have authority to do healings. I've been healing the sick since I was 19 years old. So healing power does work. And then the next story is about Peter's mother-in-law. Okay. Now, this is an interesting story because a lot of times, a lot of the stories about healing have to do with things that you might say are big things. You know, like giving a blind person his sight, or restoring a limb, or the case of the person with palsy, or the leper. I mean, these are like big things, right? Well, what about day-to-day fevers and colds and flu, you know? I mean, is there anything too small for the power of God? And the answer to that would have to be no, because here's Peter's mother-in-law, and she's sick with a fever. She might have had a touch of the flu or whatever, you know, which is, you know, one of those simple things that we all get and everybody gets better, you know. But, you know, he heals her and she's back to work, you know. And so it doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't have to wait for some life-threatening situation to give a blessing. You know, when my kids were little, one of them would come home with the flu and you know, Dad, I'm not feeling well, you know, and so I'd lay hands on him and give him a blessing, or him or her, because I had 2 girls and 3 boys. And then afterwards, I would line up all the others, and I'd give them blessings so they wouldn't get sick. And my wife, and then I almost never get sick, so, you know, I was okay. So, just, you know, everyday things, you know. Kids would get ear infections or whatever, you know, just the everyday sicknesses of childhood or whatever. And I'd give them a blessing, they get better, you know, just like that. Of course, I got a lot of other stories about healing, but the healing power works for big things and little things. But it says that you know, many the people brought their sick and their and people that were possessed of demons. They'd bring them to Jesus, and he would heal the sick, and he would cast out the devils. I mean, so like I say, the stories that are here are not the only ones, but Matthew told a story about this person or that person to demonstrate God's way of doing healings and so on. Okay, so then there was a guy that comes to him and he says, I'll go wherever you go. I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said, the foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head. Okay, when you enter into the ministry of God, there's no guarantee that you're going to have a place to live. You know, Jesus I'm sure that Jesus in his travels, they didn't always have a house to stay in, and people didn't always take him in, and sometimes they were sleeping sleeping out in the country or whatever, and sometimes they didn't, but you don't really have a home. So keep that in mind. I mean, the last time I went on a full-time ministry, when I first started the ministry, I was in a house, but I lost my house because I wasn't making any money to pay the mortgage, so I lost the house, and I stayed with whoever would take me in. That's just the way it is. Okay, so before you say, well, I'm going to follow you wherever you go, bear in mind that your life is not going to necessarily be comfortable while you're in the ministry. Anyway, then another disciple said, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. And Jesus said unto him, follow me and let the dead bury their dead. When you're called to the service of God, you're in the service of the living, not the service of the dead. And it's a hard thing, and I know that because my dad died when I was on my last full-time mission. And I couldn't go to my dad's funeral, but it didn't matter because my dad, after he died, he was sent back to be my guardian angel. So, he's, as far as I'm concerned, my dad's still alive. So, and I said my goodbyes to my physical dad, the physical part of my dad, 5 years before he died. He had Alzheimer's and he had arthritis in every bone in his body, so he was hurting pretty bad, and I tried to heal him, but it's another story, but he wasn't completely healed. I healed him of some things, but I couldn't heal him of all things, and I don't know if it was me or if it was him or whatever, but it didn't completely work. But in any case, when my dad died, I wasn't able to go, and I'd already said goodbye to my dad when he was reduced to being just a vegetable, pretty much. And so when he did die, I was good. I was good with my dad, and then after that, I found out he was my guardian angel, and so, well, okay, he's still around. I was happy. But anyway, then we get into the story about calming the sea. So he and the disciples were out at sea, and a storm came up and tossed the ship to and fro, and the disciples became afraid, and they woke him up and they said, save us, we perish. And he said unto them, why are you afraid, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. Okay, faith versus fear. Okay, and I think I may have said something about this previously, about when we worry or when we're afraid. Fear is negative energy. Nothing good comes because of fear. Faith, on the other hand, brings about positive results. Okay, these men were afraid of the ship sinking and drowning and so on. You stay afraid, you don't do what you need to do to stay alive. Faith motivates you to do what you have to do to make sure the ship doesn't sink. Don't be afraid of it, and in the case of you have the power of God, well, then use your faith to cause the storm to settle down, and so the winds go away and all that. Okay, so that's faith versus fear. If you're afraid, you don't do what you need to do to move forward. But with faith, you do what you have to do to save your lives. You do what you have to do to make things better. See? And this is an important point to understand about doing things in the kingdom of God. It requires faith. All right? And then we get into the story of casting out the devils that were casting out the devils that possessed the man in the tombs, right? no, two possessed with demons coming out of the tombs. And nobody dared get near to them because they were fierce and, horrible and so on. I mean, the demons were not nice to people that passed their way. And the point of this story is to demonstrate that a person possessed of demons can be possessed of more than one. And in this case, there were many more. There wasn't just a few demons that would possess this man. And they pleaded with Jesus that he wouldn't cast them into hell. And they pleaded with him that he would cast them into the herd of swine. Now, for Jews, being cast into a herd of swine wasn't a bad thing, because swine were unclean animals anyway in the Jewish thing. So casting them into the swine, was not a bad thing necessarily, except for the people that owned the swine. Because what happened was that the swine, they didn't want to be possessed of the demons, and so they ran down the slope and drowned themselves in the sea. Okay, well, because of the people saw that Jesus had this great power over the demons, they decided that they didn't want Jesus to stay in their coast, and so they came out and asked him to go someplace else. Okay. Well, there's a whole chapter. There's chapter 8, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you read it, and I hope you have some questions, because I do enjoy very much answering questions about the Bible and why things are the way they are in the Bible. And so until next time, God bless you all, and make sure that you subscribe and ask questions in the comments. Thank you.